You are standing in a security hallway beneath the West Wing and your phone is already gone. They took it at the third checkpoint. No bag. No ID visible. Just a visitor badge, laminated, beige, no name printed on it. The fluorescent lights overhead hum at a frequency that feels designed to make you feel small. The air smells like recycled carpet and document shredder. You've been in this hallway for 11 minutes. Nobody has told you why the wait. Nobody explains anything down here. You didn't come because they trust you. You came because your private memos were right. 3 of them. Sent through back channels, forwarded by someone you've never met, landing on desks you were never supposed to reach. The memos weren't brilliant. They were just honest, about waste, about the $4.7 billion disappearing through layered contractor chains, about how a crisis that looked like bureaucratic incompetence was actually a design flaw that 17 people had agreed in writing to protect. You are not ambitious tonight. You are offended. Offended by how many ordinary people get reclassified as acceptable damage while senior officials call it difficult trade-offs. You believe the truth is enough. You believe if the right person simply reads the real numbers, things can change. That belief is your engine tonight. A senior official in a gray suit appears, shakes your hand without warmth, and gives you your first assignment in a voice too quiet for the hallway. Find where billions are disappearing inside a patriotic public program nobody is allowed to question. You realize in that moment this is not advisory work. This is a test. Then, almost as an afterthought, he mentions that one of your memos reached the president personally. Your hand doesn't shake, but something in your chest does. 3 days later, the first file they give you contains proof that a deadly policy failure was predicted 11 days before it happened, and deliberately buried. You work through the night in a borrowed office on the second sublevel. No window. One cold cup of coffee. A monitor throwing pale blue light across your face. By 4:17 a.m. you find it. The leak isn't dramatic. It never is. Layered contractors, 7 shells deep, running duplicate billing chains through emergency procurement codes that legally bypass standard audit flags. $340 million rerouted as speed premiums during a 6-month crisis window. The same invoices, different vendor names, different zip codes, same handwriting in the metadata. You write the corrective brief in 23 minutes. By morning, funds are frozen. The supply program, a veteran pharmaceutical distribution chain serving 94,000 households, stabilizes before the press even realizes it was 3 weeks from collapse. No press conference. No announcement. Just the quiet click of a system correcting itself because you showed it where it was broken. For the first time, the machine responds to you. People inside the building start looking at you differently. Some with curiosity. Some with something that looks like calculation. A senior staffer passes you in the corridor and smirks, calls you the ghost accountant. Another says, loud enough for you to hear, that you're dangerous because you talk like someone with nothing to lose. You like that? This is the seduction of competence. In your own mind you are still clean. You are helping veterans, families, supply chains that feed hospitals and schools. You are not lying, you are exposing. And because the first correction works so fast, so cleanly, you begin to believe the problem was never evil. Just cowardice. That belief becomes the first crack in your armor. A cabinet official holds a press briefing taking full credit for the fix. And instead of anger, instead of the fury that should be yours, you feel something worse. Satisfaction. That same night you are called back. Not to fix waste this time. To decide which of 2 failing regions gets saved first. They don't call it a choice. They call it a prioritization exercise. 2 regions. Both in crisis. One can be stabilized immediately with existing federal resources. The other will have to absorb the delay, somewhere between 19 and 26 days depending on logistics. The officials around you speak in budget clusters, response corridors, cascading impact models. The language is precise, technical, almost calming. But you see what the words actually mean. Region A, 340,000 people. Dense population. Major hospital network. 3 media markets. High cascading risk if the disruption spreads. Region B, 112,000 people. Borough. Older demographic. Fewer cameras. Less volatility on paper. You make the call in under 4 minutes. Region A. It is the logical answer. The defensible answer. The answer any economist with a spreadsheet and a deadline would reach. It is also the moment you quietly decide that 112,000 strangers are more survivable than 340,000 others. And then, the worst part. You are right. The decision works politically, economically, structurally. Market panic cools within 48 hours. News coverage praises the response as swift and coordinated. The president's confidence in your judgment grows visibly. So does your access. You tell yourself someone had to choose. Then the field reports from Region B start arriving. Not tragedy, nothing clean enough to become a headline. Pharmacy shortages stretching into week 3. 2 rural schools closed due to supply disruptions. 17 county clinics overwhelmed past capacity, their directors sending quiet emergency requests into a federal inbox that responds with automated confirmations. Quiet damage. The kind no camera fully captures. You sit with the reports for 40 minutes. Then you close the files. You tell yourself someone had to choose. The second time you say it, it sounds almost true. 3 days later, the president asks for your opinion directly for the first time. In front of 3 cabinet members. He calls your regional decision, the kind of courage this place has been missing for a decade. You don't correct him. Your role changes. Subtly at first. So subtly you almost miss it. You are no longer the person who fixes numbers after the damage begins. You become the person who decides which numbers rise to the top before decisions are made. That is a different kind of power entirely. Quieter. More total. You learn something that no briefing document will ever say out loud. Most policy is shaped by sequence, not substance. Whoever frames the first summary usually shapes the final outcome. The first 3 sentences of a memo carry more weight than the 40 pages behind them. So now you begin choosing emphasis. Which threat sounds urgent? Which cost sounds manageable? Which warning gets highlighted in red? Which gets moved to an appendix? Your language shifts. Quietly. You stop saying families and start writing pressure zones. You stop writing neighborhoods and start writing instability corridors. You stop mentioning the human cost in the opening paragraph and start placing it in section 4, below the budget projections. It is cleaner this way. Sentiment, you tell yourself, is exactly how corruption survives. Sentiment lets bad actors hide behind sympathetic faces. Your job is to remove noise. Then your cousin calls. She's known you since you were both 12 years old, eating rice in a kitchen the size of a parking space, watching the news together and cataloging everything wrong with the country. She listens to you speak for 7 minutes. Then she is quiet for a long time. She says, "You sound like the people we used to hate." You argue back. Art. You tell her about the veteran supply chain. About Region A. About the 340,000 people who are okay right now because someone made a clean decision. You tell her that idealism without discipline is how the machine eats people alive. You win the argument. Her silence afterward feels worse than losing. 2 weeks later, a senior aide informs you that certain crisis memos, the most sensitive ones, will now reach the president only after passing through your review first. You don't ask for clarification. You already understand what that means. The disruption hits on a Tuesday. Cyber interference first, power grid anomalies in 4 states. Then transportation breakdowns cascading through eastern logistics hubs. Retail shortages triggering rumor spirals on social platforms before the government's own communication systems can respond. Governors hold competing press conferences. 3 agencies release contradictory public guidance within 6 hours. Cable news runs a countdown clock. 431 straight hours, you become the calmest person in the federal government. You don't sleep. You don't need to. You prioritize the response sequence. Consolidate contradictory messaging into a single federal posture. Personally kill 3 press briefings that would have inflamed the confusion further. Push the president, directly in a room with 4 other people who disagree with you, toward one blunt, fast, unpopular course of action. The system doesn't just survive. It tightens. Markets recover. Approval ratings climb 9 points in 72 hours. The disruption becomes a case study in federal coordination efficiency. Senior officials who made your life difficult 6 months ago are now quoting your exact phrasing in congressional briefings, as if the words grew from their own thinking. You did what you came here to do. You made government function under pressure. And that should feel like the thing you always wanted. Except the chapter doesn't end there. Lobbyists begin refining their language to survive your filter. Department heads restructure their resource requests around your known preferences. Political actors, people with agendas you would have despised 3 years ago, start treating you as the gatekeeper. Not an obstacle. Not an outsider. The gatekeeper. You are not outside the machine anymore. You are its most efficient component. Someone makes a joke at a senior staff meeting. Nothing reaches the president unless it survives you first. 3 people laugh. The other 4 don't. Nobody looks at you directly while the joke lands. That's when you notice something cold settling into the room. That night, reviewing post-crisis structural reports, you discover that 3 of your emergency coordination systems are being formally converted into permanent federal infrastructure. Nobody asked you first. The fallout doesn't arrive with sirens. It arrives in spreadsheets. One of your efficiency-driven restructures, a healthcare resource reallocation you signed off on during the crisis window, begins producing unintended downstream effects. A rural region loses 14 community clinics faster than your model projected. Addiction treatment programs get interrupted mid-cycle. Water quality inspections get delayed by an average of 31 days across 6 counties. 3 rural hospitals start absorbing pressure loads they were never structurally designed to handle. On paper, the policy remains defensible. The numbers support it. The alternatives would have cost more in the short term. The logic is clean. In real life, people are stranded. You sit alone reading the field reports past midnight. You read the numbers first. Then you find the local photos embedded in the county assessments. Pharmacy shelves half empty, a hand-painted sign on a closed clinic door, an elderly woman sitting on a folding chair outside a building that no longer opens on Tuesdays. Then testimony. Then the numbers again. The pattern becomes unbearable because the model did not malfunction. It did exactly what you optimized it to do. That realization cracks something in you that had been holding for 3 years. Up until now, every compromise had language around it. Necessity. Limited harm. Bigger picture. Acceptable trade-offs. But this time the truth is ugly and naked and refuses to dress itself in strategy. Efficiency has victims. And they don't disappear just because their suffering is administratively tidy. You open a new document at 1:48 a.m. You type, "I am resigning effective." You stare at the sentence for 6 minutes. You close the document without saving. For the first time since you walked into that basement hallway, you ask yourself whether your anger made you cruel. Whether the rage that brought you here, the honest, justified, righteous rage about how systems crush ordinary people, quietly became the same force it once wanted to stop. Before you can answer, an encrypted memo lands in your terminal. Subject line, containment options. Your name is in the first paragraph. You expect the fallout to force accountability. Instead, the system adjusts. That is the horror. Within 2 weeks of the field reports becoming internally visible, you watch something extraordinary happen from the inside. Staffers begin pre-cleaning data before it reaches your desk. Risks get rephrased in the language you have trained yourself to respond to. Harm gets translated into acceptable ratios before it enters your inbox. Ethical discomfort gets packaged as operational necessity before it ever reaches a decision memo. The machine hasn't rejected you. It has learned your shape. It has grown around you the way water grows around stone, seamlessly, completely, without acknowledgement. That's when you finally understand the real danger. You were never dismantling the structure. You were teaching it how to become faster, cleaner, harder to interrogate. Every efficiency you introduced became a feature. Every shortcut became policy. Every filter became architecture. And still you stay. Because the alternative is a faction you've watched circling the edges for 18 months. People who would weaponize the same chaos more crudely, with less discipline, without even the restraint that occasionally makes you lose sleep. You convince yourself that if you leave, something worse fills the space. Less conscience, less precision, more damage. So you make the most seductive argument of all. Better me than them. You say it to yourself on a Wednesday morning while clearing 3 memos from your queue. The words feel noble. They feel like sacrifice. They are also the exact sentence that chains you permanently to the thing you came here to expose. One afternoon you quietly kill a proposal that would have restructured Emergency Resource Authority in a way that bordered on constitutional violation. Nobody knows you stopped it. Nobody thanks you. But you feel it, that small, warm, dangerous feeling of proof. You still belong here. Then your encrypted terminal receives a message through an unofficial back channel. No sender name. No agency header. Just 10 words from an investigative reporter who has been watching the architecture from the outside. I know someone is shaping this from the shadows. You meet her at a diner near Union Station. Not a parking garage. Not a back channel dead drop. A diner with fluorescent lighting and laminated menus and coffee that tastes like it was brewed the previous administration. The banality is what makes it sharp. 2 people having breakfast. One of them carries state secrets. The other carries a recorder disguised as a pen. She doesn't know your full identity yet. But she knows enough. She knows there is an invisible filtering layer between federal policy and public explanation. She knows decisions are being pre-shaped before they reach the people officially empowered to make them. She thinks exposing you will expose corruption. What she doesn't yet understand is that you also prevented things nobody will ever see. So the conversation becomes something stranger than an interrogation. You try to redirect her toward the architecture, the contractor webs, the political insulation layers, the performance theater that passes for governance at the public-facing level. You want the story to hit the structure, not just the shadow person inside it. You want the story to be about the machine, not the operator. She listens. She is very good at listening. Then she sets her coffee cup down. She asks, how many people paid for your version of order? The diner keeps moving around you. A plate clatters somewhere behind the counter. A man in a green jacket laughs at something on his phone 3 tables over. You have no answer. Not because you don't care. Because you know the number is real. You know the clinics, the counties, the 31-day inspection delays, the pharmacy shelves, the woman on the folding chair. You have the spreadsheets. You have done the math. The math is the problem. She gives you 48 hours to decide whether to help expose the deeper structure. You shake her hand. You walk out into the gray morning air. When you return to your secure terminal that evening, you discover that your highest level access tier has been quietly revoked. Someone above you has been watching for 7 days. Doors open slower now. It's not dramatic. No security detail repositioning. No hostile glances. Just a half-second of hesitation before a room acknowledges your arrival. Conversations that pause 1 beat longer than they used to. People who once needed you becoming polite in a way that feels rehearsed, like they've been briefed on a new protocol. You trace internal system permissions over 3 hours on a Tuesday evening. Someone above your clearance level has been monitoring your terminal activity, your building access timestamps, and your encrypted correspondence for 7 days. Then the summons comes. Oval Office. No staff scheduled. No agenda distributed. The president is calm when you enter, which is worse than anger. He thanks you for your service before you've taken your seat. That phrasing, before you've spoken a single word, tells you this conversation is not about loyalty. It's about disposal. He speaks for 4 minutes. He tells you that governments are judged by outcomes, not purity. He says you succeeded because you understood that faster than the idealists ever did. He says the tragedy, and he uses that word deliberately, slowly, is not that you changed during your time here. It's that you were always built for this. That line lands differently than anything else he has said in 3 years. Because part of you, a quiet, terrible part, fears he is correct. He offers you an exit wrapped in prestige. Silence. Protection. A rewritten biography. A future with your name attached to nothing controversial, nothing provable, nothing that could be reconstructed into a pattern. Everything disappears cleanly if you cooperate. Your contribution becomes a footnote nobody can find. For 1 full second, sitting in that chair with the morning light crossing the resolute desk, you almost accept. Then you think about the woman on the folding chair. The closed clinic door. The 48-hour window the reporter gave you. You stand. You shake his hand. You walk out of the Oval Office knowing you have just triggered the release package you spent 4 weeks quietly preparing. And knowing you may have destroyed yourself without destroying the machine. The exposure does damage. But not the kind you once pictured when you imagined this moment. For resignations. Congressional hearings that run 11 days and produce 340 pages of findings, most of which are immediately classified. Cable news runs the story for 9 days before a diplomatic incident replaces it in the rotation. 3 major contractor networks get audited. 1 senior operator is indicted. 2 more are quietly reassigned to positions with longer titles and smaller budgets. The story is real. The impact is real. And then the system does what systems always do. It absorbs the shock. That is the bittersweet collapse you were never told to prepare for. Not defeat. Not vindication. Something quieter and more permanent than either. Your name is never fully public, the layers held there. But your old life is gone anyway. The apartment. The clearance. The borrowed office on the 2nd sublevel with the cold coffee and the pale blue monitor light. Gone. Relationships fracture in ways that don't announce themselves. They just go quiet. Your cousin, the one who called you and said you sounded like the people you used to hate, sends a final message. 7 words. * you were trying to save people. Then, *. That is the line you will carry longest. You are somewhere anonymous now. A short-term flat with no framed photographs. A balcony overlooking a street you don't know yet. Below you, a new administration is holding its first major press conference, promising transparency, promising accountability, promising the kind of governance that restores trust. They are using more polished versions of the same hidden tools. You can see it already from the outside, the way a former surgeon recognizes a technique. Then your phone vibrates on the railing beside your coffee cup. Blocked number. No digits displayed. Just the pulse of it against the cold metal. You stare at it. You know exactly what answering would mean. The hallway again. The badge with no name. The fluorescent hum. The file already waiting on the desk. The phone vibrates a second time. You let it ring. The question the audience is left with, the one that has no answer, is not whether power corrupted you. It's what anger becomes when nobody can stop it. If this story made you think, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done?